New Explorer Core, First Arm, Spinward Operations Area, System J5241, February 22nd, 3152. The Rabbit's Foot idled over the nadir jump point of the orange dwarf star designated J5241. The ship was one tiny speck of white, indistinguishable from the background stars, even with the jump ship's massive solar sails unfurled. Standing on the Rabbit's Foot bridge, Lieutenant Cal Levitt drank something foul-tasting that he was told was loaded with caffeine. It had been several weeks since the incident that had claimed one of the team's battle mechs and had left the captain unwilling or unable to continue the mission. Levitt's concern for his friend, Rin, grew by the hour, but there were only so many unanswered knocks at her cabin door that could be attempted before the whole mission would go bankrupt and fall apart. He'd have to step in the meantime. At least the food packets were being snapped up from outside the door, so he knew she was still alive. On the holotable, the J5241 system slowly spun in all of its glory of faded colors. The star seemed quite stable and hospitable toward the planets that orbited it, of which there were several good candidates for exploration. One of them was way outside the star's habitable zone, so Cal sent Ariana to drop some probe drones down onto the frozen surface. It was unlikely that the drones would find anything, but you never know out here in the periphery. The two other planets were more likely to be habitable. The planet closest to the star was designated J1 and was significantly less Terran-like than the other. It was smaller and less dense than ideal, but at 0.6 gravity it was still technically survivable. The greens and blues visible from the long-range scans are what made the science team giddy. Levitt expected much more interesting data when Ariana headed that way with her remaining drones. The third planet was going to be a problem, and it wasn't something Cal wanted to bother Rin with right now. Not one, but two messages were transmitted to the Rabbit's Foot upon arrival in system. To unknown jump ship, greetings and welcome to the Talhit system. It is our great pleasure to hear of your arrival and happily offer you resupply at our humble colony's starport. Your hesitancy to make an in-system burn with your dropships suggests peaceful intentions. We have not had the opportunity to trade with outsiders in quite some time and can do so in terms favorable to both our peoples. As planetary chairman, I think it's important that we make the first friendly gesture. Therefore, we have shared the coordinates for our spaceport. We look forward to hearing from you. Sincerely, Planetary Chairman Tyler Pollock. 2. In-System Jump Ship. We are honored to welcome you to the Talhit system. As the planet's true planetary chairman, I offer assistance in exchange for trade and news from outside the system. While we can defend ourselves from pirates if necessary, our scanners suggest that you have other intentions. I look forward to hearing from you as soon as possible. Once we have made contact, we can move forward with what will likely be a positive and mutually beneficial relationship. Respectfully, Planetary Chairman Sarah Chen. 2 messages from 2 people claiming to be planetary chairman, each seemingly ignoring the existence of the other, set off more than a few alarm bells in Levitt's brain. Their use of the title Planetary Chairman suggested that the settlement or settlements were originally set up under the Draconis Combine. That made this important, as their employer would want to know if there was a planet out here in the periphery that could lay claim on territory for the Combine. Before sending a response, Levitt would need some input. Olivia grew up on a Combine world and even attended the DCMS Academy as a teenager. If anyone could offer some insight here, it would be her. When she walked in with her dark hair pulled into a single braid and wearing her usual dark gray MechWarrior jumpsuit, Levitt nodded and waved her over. On her way across the bridge, Olivia glanced over at the captain's chair and raised an eyebrow. Clearly Rin was not out of her funk yet, and that concerned many on the ship. It was doubly concerning for Olivia because she understood that the captain was struggling with things even before the Tenica incident. Levitt watched Olivia's face for a reaction as she read the 2 messages pulled up on the holotable. "Well, what do you make of it?" Levitt asked after a bit. Olivia frowned for a moment before replying. "As with anything Combine, appearances matter. The fact that they're both eager to contact us right away and even offering landing coordinates suggests that they need us to buy their story before any other. If they're both calling themselves the true planetary chairman, there's clearly a disagreement over that fact." "Sounds like a fight we'd be better off staying away from," Levitt said as he turned to look back at the planet's holographic representation in the air above the table. "We're not exactly equipped to get into the middle of a civil war," Olivia added. "The smart play would be to mark the location and jump out. Let the Combine send forces to sort things out if they need to." Levitt nodded in approval. "I agree, though the Combine is going to want more information if we want to keep paying our bills. At the very least, I think we need to make landfall for a meeting. We should pick a landing zone away from both settlements and have them come to us. That might irk them a bit, but I don't want us choosing sides and getting wrapped up in some conflict we don't understand." "How's the captain doing?" Olivia asked as she glanced back towards the empty captain's chair again. "She's eating, but not talking. I think she needs to process a few things before getting back into the game," Levitt said, without a shred of his normal, jovial tone. Down in the recreation bay, Tenica and Vasil were sitting at a table and talking. Since losing her mech, Tenica had been feeling without purpose, until Vasil offered to teach her some of the finer points of running security on naval vessels. She was a quick learner, and even though some of the scheduling and patrolling of the ship was mundane, it helped Tenica keep her mind off of her lost battlemech. In exchange, Tenica insisted Vasil learn some of the card games that the mech warriors played in their off time. While he struggled a bit with the concept of bluffing, his naturally stoic look made for a perfect poker face. The pair were playing another practice hand when Kip wandered into the recreational space to grab a drink. He was wearing a technician's jumpsuit, which was coated with grime. Things had been tense with Kip since Vasil's arrival and had not improved. The aerospace pilot filled his large mug with the questionably fresh caffeinated drink before turning and leaning against the countertop. Vasil hadn't said a word to the man since they first met, and Tenica was clearly ignoring Kip. Instead, she focused on explaining how certain sets and combinations of cards were worth more than others. "You know you can't teach a clanner to be civilized. At best, you're simply training them to be more efficient monsters," Kip said before taking a long sip from his mug. "Shouldn't you be working on your ship? With Ariana out, you should be protecting the jump ship," Tenica responded without looking away from the cards in her hand. "True enough, but my bird will be back in the air in a few hours. How's your mech doing?" Vasil's eyebrow went up, and he was about to stand when Tenica reached out and caught his forearm. A little shake of her head kept the elemental from escalating things further. When Kip saw this, he chuckled. "You might have the mech warriors fooled, but I can see what is happening. Ever since you started stinking up this ship with your clanner bullshit, everything's been getting worse." Kip shrugged and continued when neither Vasil nor Tenica reacted. "I'm not the only one who understands." On his way out of the room, Vasil's voice stopped him. "I have not harmed you. However, if you continue to disrespect others, we will have to settle things." "Typical clanner. You think every problem should be solved with violence." Kip took the last word, already out of the door and walking down the hall. New Explorer Corps, First Arm, Spinward Operations Area, System J5241, February 26, 3152. After a 72-hour burn toward the planet the locals called Garden, the Eulalia entered the atmosphere and gradually slowed its descent towards scrublands identified by Levitt as roughly half the distance between the two major settlements on the planet. Contact was made with both groups, and careful effort was made to establish that the new Explorer Corps were there for purely informational and scientific efforts and not economic or military concerns. The reply from each settlement was muted, clearly showing some disappointment that the dropship wasn't headed to their respective spaceports. Thankfully, both were sending representatives to meet the Eulalia as it set down. Levitt and Olivia decided that a reasonable show of strength would be useful in making sure that everyone was on their best behavior. That's why when Levitt walked down the Eulalia's ramp, he was flanked by Akif in his Calliope and Olivia in her Thunderbolt. Tenica walked on Levitt's right side, carrying a laser rifle on her back and looking like she was quite capable of using it. Waiting for them, at considerable distance from each other, were the two representatives and their groups. Each of them looked entirely annoyed to be standing there out in the scrub brush. That was fine for Levitt, who preferred them to be slightly uncomfortable and therefore more likely to be hesitant to cause trouble. Behind each representative stood several dozen soldiers in garb that looked to Levitt as vaguely reminiscent of uniforms from the Draconis Combine. Their black tunics were Spartan, though the representatives were each wearing white jackets with black slacks. As he and Tenica walked closer, cutting the distance between the representatives into two, he looked from group to group, noticing small differences in the uniforms. Finally, reaching the middle, Levitt stood motionless with his arms crossed over his chest. Akif and Olivia's mechs stood motionless at the base of the dropship ramp, looking over the whole affair. If the representatives were expecting Levitt to walk one way or the other, they were mistaken. Nearly a full minute passed before anyone moved. Once one of the representatives started walking toward Levitt, the other quickly followed. Levitt looked back at Tenica and smirked as the two representatives ended up briskly walking, then jogging, then running toward Levitt in order to be the first to greet the newcomers. Breathlessly, the first to grasp Levitt's hand for a handshake announced himself. "Hello, I am Taisa Simon Chen. Planetary Chairman Sarah Chen welcomes you." Levitt nodded and returned the handshake just as the other representative ran up, taking a few breaths before saying, The real Planetary Chairman, Tyler Pollock, welcomes you to the garden. We hope that your stay is enjoyable. I am Taisa Leon Krask. The chairman hopes to have a discussion with you at your earliest convenience." Taisa Chen bristled and then responded quickly, "It would be a shame if your time was wasted by these pretenders. I must apologize for this embarrassing situation. You have caught us in a most unpleasant situation with a treasonous element claiming power illegitimately." "Gentlemen," Levitt said, cutting off Krask's next comment, "well, it's obvious there is some sort of disagreement here. The new Explorer Corps has no interest in that. We are here in a purely peaceful and non-partisan capacity. What I ask is if you wish for official intervention from the Draconis Combine, you provide us with the appropriate petitions, which we'll carry back with us when we return to the Inner Sphere. I promise you that each petition will be given equal measure in our hands." The two men looked at Levitt, then at each other before agreeing to those terms. As the Taisas walked back to their cohorts, Levitt ordered the science team to begin their work setting up the temporary camp and research station. Even though they were in dry highlands biome, the planet sure seemed to be living up to the name Garden. After months of breathing in recycled jumpship air, this planet's atmosphere was absolute bliss in Levitt's lungs. He took several deep, slow breaths before turning to Tenica and saying, "Well, that went pretty well, considering." Tenica hugged her rifle and shrugged before responding, "Sure beats our last welcome ceremony." "Ha, yeah, fair enough," Levitt said with a chuckle. Maybe Tenica was moving past the loss of her mech with a comment like that. He sure hoped so. As the vehicles from the two groups headed back to their respective settlements, Levitt and Tenica turned back and walked toward the dropship. New Explorer Corps, First Arm, Spinward Operations Area, System J5241, February 25th, 3152. Rin sat in the darkness of her cabin, staring at the pile of aged paper documents and the computer tablet in front of her. As far as she could find, these few pieces of paper and digital documents were the only proof that this expedition had a purpose. After days of laying in bed, and even longer sitting at her desk staring at the gray aluminum in front of her, Rin decided that she needed to sort out a plan of action. Until she had one, there was no point in trying to talk to others. Gazing over the documents, some of them were scientific reports from her days in the Republic Navy. Others were documents that her grandfather had owned and prepared from his own research. There was a purpose here at some point. The last decade of her life had been spent building and toward it. Rin's eyes felt heavy again and she sighed in frustration. Giving up for now, she stood up and shuffled back toward her bed. Picking up the headphones, she slid them on and began the recording. It was one of the few things that seemed to help. End Part 9. As always, thank you for watching. While this episode wasn't filled with action, it's important to me that we get to know our characters a little bit more. If it helps, consider it an investment for future fun. Google's still working on getting some memberships running for the channel, so I hope that can be ready soon. Until then, if you like this sort of independent Battletech content, hit the like and subscribe button, comment, share the videos with others, and I'll keep plugging away at the new Explorer Core series as well as all the other fun videos for the channel. Now take care, and go make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.